Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 431 of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. I'm here today with Theresa Haselmayer, who is a holistic practitioner from Foundations Wellness, and I'm honored to have Christina Kovacs come back and be my special guest co host. Christina was featured on episode 138 of our podcast titled Lady of Lyme because she is the Lady of Lyme, and you should go check that out and listen because it's a really cool story. And that was almost 3 years ago, and she's back today to help us share Theresa's story. And Christina, I'm going to hand it over to you if you can help us walk through Theresa's story. But first, highlight her awesome credentials and how cool this interview is going to be.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Teresa is a woman of many, many talents, many certifications. She is up on everything in the Lyme world. So, yes, Teresa, if you can share with us your background, your certifications, what your specialties are with all of us listening.
Sure. I am a registered nurse. That's my licensure. And so I practiced in traditional medicine for 30 years. Long time. I worked in many different hospitals, IU Med Center, multiple med centers in New York and Cincinnati. And, I did love what I did. And I loved working in multiple different fields of medicine. And it wasn't until I got sick myself and wasn't helped at all by the system that I loved and revered and served for all those years that I even entertained the idea of doing anything different. And so I'll get into my story of Lyme disease and mold illness a little bit later, but once I did recover from 15 years of illness, I heard about a clinic in New York, in Kingston, New York, about 2 hours north of New York City. And my teacher, Hilary Thing, she's a masterful herbalist, Chinese medicine practitioner. She has trained dozens and dozens and dozens of us, but I was one of her first. So, gosh, that was 2017 that I got accepted into her program and started learning about how to uproot Lyme disease naturally, holistically. And she, of course, practicing in the hotbed of Lyme, the Hudson Valley, we saw whole families of people coming into that clinic. Every member of our family is sick. I would stay at Airbnbs and the people would tell me every person on our street is sick with Lyme disease. And it was just mind blowing to me, coming from the Midwest where, we don't have Lyme here at all, of course, is
Yeah.
what we were all told.
Mhm.
So I did study with her in herbs and in just detoxification protocols, etc., for 3 years. And then I was a teaching assistant of hers. So I did help her to teach others for 2 years after that. Simultaneously, I was starting my own practice here in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the Ohio Valley. And, it started just in the living room of my house.
Wow.
It was people who found out about me because the word sort of got out there that Theresa Haselmayer, who was sick for 15 years, and we all knew that she was sick and probably just nuts, but, she got better.
Mhm.
And how did that happen? So people just started reaching out to me on social media and text, and I just started informally coaching people. Well, that sort of grew into people paying me little bits here and there. I did study with Dr. Frank Shallenberger in Nevada. He is the president of the American Association of Ozone Therapy.
Mm.
And so, since ozone helped me tremendously back in the day, I thought I want to be a certified ozone therapist. So, he had a very long wait list, but I did get in with him after 9 months of waiting, and I trained with him. And so I just started taking my ozone equipment into people's homes because back in the day when I was a nurse, one of my favorite jobs was home care because I just loved getting to know my patients and forming relationships with them and seeing the whole picture, which you don't see when someone's laying in a hospital bed. And I knew I loved that type of one-on-one care. And so that was the beginning of my business. Well, the word just spread and more people started calling me, and I just got too busy to go into homes anymore. So I started renting an office here in Norwood, close to downtown Cincinnati. My son and my husband own this building. A little shout out to the living room. My son, Joey Haselmayer, he keeping the rent money in the family, right? And so I started renting here in 2018 and have been just steadily growing. The word just got out organically, really. I mean, I did not know how to market. I was no good at social media. It was just, the word just got out there. And different nurse practitioners and physicians were hearing about me, and their patients were coming to them saying, hey, this lady down in Norwood really got me a lot better. And so then they started sending more people my way. And I got so busy that as of I'm losing track of time. 3 or 4 years ago, I hired 2 more RNs to train from they were pediatric specialists, actually. And so one is seeing adults with me now and pediatrics. The other is a certified pediatric practitioner. So she sees only kids. She's fantastic and does a great job with the children. And then last year, I had a nurse practitioner come to me and make a dramatic turnaround in her health when she was failed by our current medical system. And she said, I want to work for you. So I didn't recruit her at all. She just came. And so I've been in the process of training her. And so she is now seeing patients. And so what started as a coaching practice is now, a legit integrative practice. So we've got a physician collaborator and we've got a nurse practitioner who are able to see people and prescribe and diagnose and order any tests that is needed. And then they've got, the 3 holistic practitioners, including pediatric specialists, and then one of our holistic practitioners is currently in training to be certified nutritionist. So nutrition and food is really a passion for hers. But because I'm just so interested, I'm just really nerdy that way. I'm just always studying, researching. I heard, because I am in 2 different medical groups, the ILADS group and ICI, the International Society of Environmentally Acquired Illness. I did get a message from Dr. Lynn Patrick and Dr. Anne Marie Fine of the Environmental Medicine Institute, asking for applications to their program. And I applied and was accepted. And I just finished that year-long program in April of this year. I passed my final exams in May. So I am now a certified environmental medicine practitioner with the Environmental Medicine Institute. So I would say that's probably my greatest passion, understanding why Lyme disease is able to take such a strong hold of people, why it is not always responsive to just antimicrobial therapies, and why detoxification is so key. So I think that's the whole story.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you have quite the background. And I think what's so cool about what you were saying is that you're not just like, okay, of course, let's treat the Lyme disease, let's treat the patient, the underlying things, but you're so curious about why is Lyme disease the way it is? Why does it take hold of someone's body and wreak havoc in the way it does? And I think that's really the question that plagues us so much. And I think that's the reason that so much of medicine misses it, because they are just looking like, here's the problem, take this pill, this is the solution, and not so much trying to understand, okay, well, wait, why are these cases growing so dramatically? What's happening? Why are people so susceptible? Why are they getting so ill? So I can't wait to talk about all of that with you. I'm just like, I just know that we're going to pick your brain on this. But all right, so we'll kind of start from the beginning of, how everything transpired for you.
Okay.
Because I think it seems like you were about 36 when you first got sick. You were an RN, everything like that. But what was your path to that? What, I guess, started that passion for you to get into healthcare? What was your life like leading up to that?
Oh gosh, great question. As a high school senior, I just took a test, an aptitude test of some type, which said I would be a very good medical professional. And I chose nursing. And I applied to a 4-year program, got my bachelor's degree from the University of Evansville. And yeah, I'm just a caregiver by nature. I guess that got that healer's heart by nature. So yeah, I think that's what took me into it, and I always did love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like it's very well suited for you. Like it called to you to do
Yep.
that. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So, all right. So you get your degree. It sounds like you are working, you're also homeschooling your kids, so you have your hands very, very full. So, what does your life look like, I guess, during this time, right before you came down with Lyme disease? Like what was your day-to-day like? How were you?
Well, I was probably working night shifts at the hospital,
Mhm.
coming home and sleeping for 4 hours and then getting up and homeschooling the children.
Oh my.
So, um, I was just one of those go, 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 just high productivity people. And suddenly, we were up in New York visiting family, and it was Christmas Day of 2000. And I woke up that morning, I thought, oh, I feel really strange. This strange headache and stomach ache, but not like a typical thing. It was very different than anything I had ever felt before, and just felt very, very tired. And didn't just thought I had the flu. I didn't know what it was. And so by the time we got back home to Cincinnati, I saw my, regular family doctor. They, we did a CAT scan on my head. Everything was fine. We did, we scoped my stomach. This was over time because, so I was just diagnosed with reflux, acid reflux. And I'm like, but no, I'm very, very sick. But 8 weeks later, it just went away miraculously. I'm like, great, sweet, get back to work. And I went another 6 months of having my good normal health, and bam, went back down again. And this time it was more than just headache, stomach ache, fatigue. It was some heart pounding, and it was just very strange pain in the backs of my legs to where I couldn't even sit down anywhere. It hurt so bad. And again, I was just this time I was having trouble going to work. And I went to I went to a different primary care doctor, and he tested me for Epstein-Barr, and it was positive. My early antigen was positive. And he's like, "There you go. We figured it out. You have mono." Awesome. I knew I was really sick. And I said, and this is the same thing I had the last time. No, 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 no. You can only get mono once. No, no, you had something else. I'm telling you, it's the same symptoms. No, no, it's something else. And, you'll get over it and you'll be fine. Okay. Well, it did go away, but 3 months later, it came back. And then I think by the fourth time I hit a flare, I just didn't really ever come back to normal again. I was at this place where I had this low level inflammation all the time. And yet I had these ups and downs, these unexplainable ups and downs, which my doctor said, it's Epstein-Barr. We don't know why. It's just your genetics, I'm sure. Your body loves Epstein-Barr, is what he told me. And so I just operated out of the assumption that my body would not defeat Epstein-Barr virus, and just prayed that I would finally beat it. And so I tried every diet there was. I tried a few supplements, and nothing really helped me. Over the next 4 years, I just became sicker and sicker and sicker. And we found, I think this was, right when I started to learn how to use the internet. And I found this clinic in the Cleveland area. It was just called the Fibromyalgia and Fatigue Clinic. So by this time, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. And oh goodness, more than that. I had TMJ by this point, and I had IBS, and I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, of course. That's the only thing they ever wanted to give me was an antidepressant, because they said, well, you're just depressed.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I'm depressed because I'm sick.
Exactly.
And there's nothing we can do for Epstein-Barr. But when I went to this clinic, they said, oh, well, we'll give you Valtrex and we'll cure this Epstein-Barr. I was tested for Lyme up there and it was negative. And I'm great. It's not Lyme disease. So I guess it's the Epstein-Barr. And so for the next 6 or 9 months, I did all of their supplements and I took 4.5 grams of Valtrex, which is a very high dose every day. And it did bring my levels on my titers down, but I felt no better.
Yep.
Zero better. And I just went the next couple of years just limping along, going to prayer meetings, praying for miraculous healing. By this time, I just couldn't work at all. I was just totally disabled. And my family and friends, they loved me. They cared about me. They told me, I'm praying for you. But I don't know that anyone really believed. Like, Theresa, you look good. You sound good.
Oh, that dreaded comment. Yep.
The dreaded comment.
Yes.
And you just learn to hide it, don't you?
Yes.
You just learn to put the face on because you're like, nobody can find anything wrong with me, really. I went to this clinic, spent thousands of dollars, didn't get any better at all. So this must prove that I am crazy, that I'm just nuts. And, I got very isolated at that time. I just felt like nobody really believes me. I mean, my husband and my children, I would say, did believe me, but they didn't know how to help me. And they just, if we can't put a label on it, there's no pill we can give you, then we just don't really know what to do with you. So you just get the puppy dog eyes and we'll pray for you. And, which they meant it. And they loved me and they cared about me. But everything inside of me was screaming, will somebody please see me?
Yes.
Will somebody please understand the depth of the suffering that I feel every day? Will someone please see me and hear me and come rescue me from this deep, dark pit that I'm in? Because that's what I felt like. I felt completely alone and completely abandoned by the medical system that I had served and revered for all those years. And I got pretty jaded.
Theresa, I just want to jump in real quick because you're an insider, right? You're a registered nurse. You're a lifelong Western medical practitioner with, I'm sure, friends and, family members and colleagues that are in this industry. Now, what happened? Because what happened as you started to get sick? Did these people abandon you? Did they try to help you? Because it seems like you were just brushed off, like, oh, Theresa's sick, we don't know, she's crazy, or oh, we can't help her. So how did that transition occur from being an insider to now being an outcast?
Well, when we can't find what's wrong with you on a lab test, we just assume you're psychiatric. I mean, I think far more medical professionals are more open-minded now, but back in, 2004 through 2015, which is how long it took for me to get diagnosed with Lyme disease, you were just assumed chronic fatigue syndrome is a mental illness. And so I just think they didn't know how to help me. And I certainly didn't fit into the model of 11-minute visit to the doctor to be able to find out to figure out. They just don't have any education. They just didn't have any education around these things. And I think the other thing that prevented me from getting help was that I believed in the test. As a medical professional, when I was told that my Lyme disease test was negative, I believed I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
that was the
that's
other thing.
yes, yes. And it's also so much of a struggle because it also sounds like, your story of your symptoms, they're so widespread everywhere. And typically too, if you were to just Google acute Lyme disease, for example, it doesn't, it talks about, of course, like the initial flu-like symptoms, but most of the time you can't get a lot of information on what it is when it starts to spread in your body, because it sounds like you had issues everywhere. And
Yep.
so, each doctor that would look at you, they would look at their specialty and they would probably say, okay, well, you have GERD. Okay, well, you have IBS. Well, you have, and then they're just kind of giving you individual labels versus seeing you as a whole person. And versus like just being able to understand that. So it sounds like that also was a big part of it too.
And being in the Midwest, we just, our infectious disease society for the very longest time, and even now, there's very few that will buy into the fact that we have Lyme disease here.
Yes.
And so I think that it just wasn't on their radar screen at all.
Yeah.
Not at
Very
all.
true.
Because I
Very
didn't
true.
see the tick. I didn't see a bullseye rash. So I didn't have that classic story.
Yeah, and it's yes, it's so interesting because even though, you could tell the story of, hey, I was in New York, I was in this area, like right in the middle of, where all the ticks are, and yet still, still people just kind of didn't take that backstory into consideration, which is something that's so different from the integrative practice, because in integrative medicine, they want to know everything. They're like, okay, so when did this symptom start? Okay, tell me exactly what you were doing. Where were you before this? It's such a different way of viewing it. But I also am from the Midwest, and so I understand that feeling that people don't even believe that Lyme disease exists there. It's like, oh, that's a Northeast problem. That's not a here problem. So, oh my gosh. So as you're walking through the 15 years that it takes you to get an answer, what was the turning point for you where either Lyme came on your radar or you found a doctor that would explore it? What was that shift like for you? How'd that occur?
Yeah. I decided to, see a certain integrative physician in town. Why the heck did it take me so long, right? Why did I stick with all the traditional? It was because I was loyal,
Yeah.
I trusted them. That was my education, that was my background. But I decided to see an integrative person in town, and he diagnosed me based on a CD57. My CD57 was less than 20. In other words, they couldn't find any natural killer cells
Oh
on
my
me.
goodness.
So lower
Wow.
than most people,
Yeah.
which now I understand why it was so low. But back then, he just said, you have Lyme disease. And I'm like, no, I don't. My tests have
Yeah.
been negative. And he said, well, based on this, you do. Well, of course, what do? I ask, infectious disease. Oh, no, that's an invalid test. But by this point, I had already become suspicious, not trusting, and I was so sick and so desperate and so non-functional, and I was missing out. My son went to state for wrestling, and
Wow.
I missed so many of his wrestling meets. That
Oh,
still hurts my heart to this day.
my goodness.
And I was missing out on a lot of my kids' lives,
Yeah.
and just missing out on life in general. And I was like, I was finally ready. I was finally ready to open up. And, I still had to feel skeptical about that CD57. And so we found an integrative physician in Carmel, Indiana. And we went over there, and She did run an IGeneX on me. First time anyone had even told me what IGeneX was, and I was positive. And in fact, interestingly enough, the two bands I was positive for, band 31 and 34, were the two bands that were taken out of the diagnostic criteria after the failed Lyme vaccine. And I got thinking about it. I thought, did I get the Lyme vaccine? Did I get that? Because as nurses, every vaccine imaginable was pushed on us. And I would have been working at IU Med Center at that time. And why wouldn't they have offered me that?
Yeah.
And you don't remember all the vaccines you take because you're just like, yeah, bring them on. I'll take them all, right? Because you have such good health. It's possible that I was affected by the Lyme vaccine because
wow.
it would have been approximately 6 months to a year after I worked at that institution that I came down sick. So, but I don't know. I don't have a record of it. But it's
Yeah.
interesting to me that I did have band 31 and 34.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like very interesting. Like, what are the odds? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow.
And why
Okay.
else would I have had all those negative tests before?
Yes.
Because those
Yes.
bands are left out of the diagnostic
Yep.
criteria.
They're removed. Yes. That is
Yep.
so interesting. So when you see that now with the IGeneX and with the CD57, is that when your brain kind of is like, whoa, this
Yep.
is Lyme disease? Is that kind of when
Yep.
it switched for you?
Yeah, I finally bought in. And
Oh.
I got Dr. Horowitz's book, Why Can't I Get Better? I read the whole thing and I'm like, bring it on, baby. I want every single antibiotic you got.
When you were upstate New
And
York, Theresa, did you hear about Dr. Horowitz? Because I was thinking earlier when you mentioned where you trained, I'm like, when I read and did some research on you before this podcast, I'm like, oh, she trained upstate. It must have been Horowitz. I'm like, oh, it wasn't Horowitz. So was Horowitz on your radar or not until this time in your journey?
not until this time. Yeah, not until this time. And so when I spoke with the physician in Indianapolis about this, she put a lot of hoops for me to jump through. I won't go into all of that. And at that same time, a daughter of a friend of my parents heard about me. And she called me and she said, Theresa, I want to talk to you about this naturopath up in Michigan. She got me better from 18 years of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia and Lyme disease. And you've got to come see her. She does herbal antibiotics. And my first response was, no way. I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Hey, I am sick. I want serious medicine. Like, don't talk to me about herbs because I had no familiarity at this point with Stephen Herod Booner or the fact that we did know that herbs worked. And so I drug my feet for 3 months. I think it was a spiritual thing. I think I finally got to this point where I said, Theresa, you're allergic to a third of the antibiotics out there. So you've been sick for 15 years? What's the harm if you try this herbal antibiotic thing for 6 months? The worst that could happen is that then you go on and get the real medicine. So I went up to see Bridget Houston in Petoskey, Michigan. And she did bioenergetic scanning on me. And my husband and I were like, oh my Lord, what is this? Again, just stretching my medical mind. And she was the first person who looked at me and said, girl, you are so sick. I don't know how you're even able to stand. And I just broke down in her office and I just wept. It was
Yeah.
the first time anybody ever validated how much I had suffered.
You're
And
fully
you don't
seen.
want
Wow.
to need that, but as a
Mhm.
human, you need it. You just want that.
Yes.
You want someone to see how brave you've been to push through and put the face on so that you just anyway.
Yeah.
So she put me on herbal antibiotics. So, it was her own tinctures that she made. And she
Yeah.
said, you will get much worse before you get better. You're going to hate me before this is all done.
Ah, yes.
And I was like, okay, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I'm in. I trust you. I like what you're showing me on this test. And so every time I went back for a follow-up, I told her, I feel no better. I feel no better. In fact, within 4 days, I became completely bedbound
Mhm.
and I was just lay in my bed, just shaking with pain. I mean, I developed pudendal neuralgia. I developed interstitial cystitis. I
Oh my
developed,
gosh.
um, I couldn't even walk to my mailbox anymore. I certainly couldn't drive my car. And so my mother and my sisters had to come take care of me during that 18 months of treatment. So I'm laying in my bed all the time, right? And it was during that time that I discovered the magic of online summits. And I listened to Dr. J. Davidson's Lyme Summit
Mhm.
and just ate it all up. I mean, I just listened to every speaker and took voluminous notes. And that was the beginning of my calling, I think. I'm like,
Teresa,
I could do
so
this.
sorry to interrupt. I do want to pause you and go down a one quick rabbit hole. Interstitial cystitis is something we hear about on this podcast a lot. And I know it has to do with the bladder and frequent urination, which we hear about a lot on this podcast. Can you just take a second to geek out with us about why that occurs during treatment and also just as a symptom with Lyme disease that people generally get a misdiagnosis or, an unattributed side diagnosis when really it's related to Lyme?
Absolutely. Interstitial cystitis is just a Latin word for your urinary tract is inflamed. And so you will be told there's no known cause, and we're just going to do these bladder distillations, which I refused. Something inside of me said, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to help me. And what we have learned since then is that there are multiple factors that can create it. When you have chronic inflammation, severe inflammation of the bladder and the urethra and the ureters, it can be from Bartonella, which is a common co-infection of Lyme disease. It can be from Lyme itself. I've heard certain people say that they think it's Babesia, and there are others who will insist it's mold. I'm going to say I think it's a combination of things because mold is so immune suppressive, and mold will help create this fungal biofilm in the bladder. It will create these fungal biofilms in any external orifice. So, commonly, you'll get tinnitus with Lyme disease, but that's also a mold thing. You'll get heartburn with mold illness, also with Lyme. All of these things are external orifices where you could be inhaling mold spores. So chronic sinusitis, heartburn. But back to the interstitial cystitis, you have an opening there. And mold can get up in there and just set you up for Lyme or Bartonella to set in there. And I have found treatment-wise that when you go after these fungal biofilms and when you go after Lyme and co-infections, people get rid of interstitial cystitis.
That's
And it
amazing.
stays away.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that's the craziest thing. I think that's also what, so many people who have Lyme disease, they will have this, like, just like what Matt was saying, like a plethora of symptoms, and they will come up. And just like with you, you start treatment. And for me as well, the first time that I went the holistic route, or, more of the traditional like medicine, um, it was the first time I ever heard listen, you will get worse, then you'll get better. Or the first time I heard what a Herxheimer reaction is. And when you hear it, you're like, yeah, whatever. Just like, give it to me. Let me get better. But when you live it, man, it's just, I mean, it is definitely a doozy. So now you're in bed, you're incredibly sick, you're taking these herbs. What's going through your head during this time when you're learning everything and when you're kind of struggling? What is your outlook, I guess I should say?
Well, I think that the treatment process itself, I was wondering, is this really working?
Mhm.
I kept telling my husband, I would, break down crying. I don't think it's working. And he would say, remember what she said. Remember what. So he was the one who said, hang in there. She told you it was going to take a long time. So just hang in there. And so I would say that Jerry was the one that really kept me on track. But the beauty of me laying in bed and having all that time on my hands of watching all of these lectures and summits, I was able to decide, I think I'd like to try this, or I think I'd like to try that. So I think hope started to grow in me because
Yes.
I knew it's not just this one thing. Like, there's many things you can try.
Mhm.
And that's when I started looking at mold. And I had had a negative urine test for mold and my house tested on the ERMI -2. So I was convinced that mold was not a part of my picture, when in reality, one day I dropped something under a board under my kitchen sink and I lifted the board and lo and behold, black mold all up under there.
Oh,
And I just was horrified. And
yeah.
that's when the light bulb finally came on for me that mold actually was a big part of my picture and why I was herxing so bad
Yeah.
and why I was failing to make very good progress on the herbs alone.
Mhm.
So the group out in Indianapolis did help me start, they taught me about mold binders and that's when I started ozone therapy. And after 18 long months, combining mold treatment with the Lyme treatment, my body did come back to life in almost a kind of a miraculous way.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think to maybe for someone who maybe doesn't know about what mold does to the body, how it suppresses it, how it allows Lyme to come in, different diseases, can you talk a little bit more about what that kind of like the chokehold that it does on the body, like
Yeah.
what mold can do?
Yeah. If you are in an environment where you're inhaling mold spores are alive.
Mhm.
So when you inhale them, they do have little roots on them called hyphae, and they will just plant down, the external orifices of the body, the sinuses, the esophagus, the ears, the urinary tract, the vagina in women. So we'll end up with pudendal neuralgia, which I did. It was horrific
Oof.
pain. And when they plant down, they will whatever you eat, they feed on, especially if you're consuming sugars and grains, and then they poop. They create
Yeah.
waste products, and those waste products are called mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are extremely inflammatory. So they'll inflame those local areas where they've planted down. They will also suppress the immune system. They also poison the mitochondria so that you don't even have enough energy that you need to detoxify mold. And then mold can be very, very confusing because of the 5 people who lived in our house, I was the only person who got sick from it. I think one son had nosebleeds, one son had heartburn, one son had a non-healing wrestling injury. So they were minor things that they felt that they could just press through. I was the only person who became debilitated. And so that's sort of the mechanism of mold, the mycotoxins, the poisons that the mold now living in your body are poisoning your mitochondria, poisoning your organs, and making everything so inflamed that no matter what antibiotic you're taking, and no matter what herb you're taking, you're not making the progress that you feel like you should make. And you can even move out of a moldy place and you can think, well, now I should get better. But what most people are missing is the fact that now you have colonized that mold. It is growing in you. So you can't just remediate. You can't just move away. You've got to now, I call it the 5-step process, where we stop the exposure, number one. Number two, we've got to get in there and effectively kill it. And resistant fungi that we find in water damaged buildings don't always respond to the medications. Sometimes they do, but what we have found in the groups I'm in is that it's never enough. You need the botanicals because nature fights nature best. And so you've got to get in there and kill those fungal organisms, whether it's yeast and cladosporium or penicillium or aspergillus, which is huge. Stachybotrys is huge. And then you've got to mop up those mycotoxins with high quality binders. And then you've got to replenish the good bacteria that have been killed off by those mycotoxins. So it's quite a process.
Theresa, I'm sorry, I'm taking notes on your 5-step process, and I think I missed one. So it was stop the exposure, kill the mycotoxins, mop up the dead, we'll call it, substances in your body with binders, and then replenish the good stuff in your body. What step did I miss? I only have 4.
Step 5 for not all people, but many people who have had these immune suppressive mycotoxins develop parasite overgrowths. So they need parasite cleansing. So that is what I would call my step 5.
Got it. So those are the 5 steps for mold. So I want to ask you, because we've had somebody ask this question recently. Hey, I've been exposed to mold in my home and I'm sick, and it's showing up in a test that I have mycotoxins in my body. But why is my husband healthy? Right? How would you respond to that? Because it's such a common question. And I want to, you're explaining things so well. I want to have a good snippet I can refer to when people ask that question on this podcast.
No, that's an excellent question, because I get that all the time. You get the skeptical spouse. It's one of the hardest parts about being a practitioner, is because that person is willing to hear what you're saying, but the spouse is saying, don't listen to that crazy lady. I'm not sick. So there's no way that you're sick from it because I'm not sick. That's where a combination of genetics, certain people will detoxify mycotoxins better than others. Also, how full was your toxin bucket with environmental? So as an environmental toxin practitioner, this is the subject that is nearest and dearest to my heart. I grew up near a nuclear uranium enrichment plant. And the EPA knew they were leaching radioactive uranium into our little community for 40 years and did nothing about it. And so my body was filled with radioactive uranium and mercury from my dental fillings and lead. And so I think my husband and my sons didn't have those exact toxins in their body as I did. And so we all have these poisons in our body. Like when we test people in our office, almost every single one has Roundup or pesticides in their body. But some people have a lot more than others because they don't detoxify as well. And so when that person's toxin bucket gets really, really full with these things, they cannot detoxify mold. They just can't do it. So that they will be the one person who gets sick in that home when everyone else seems to be doing just fine.
That is fascinating. Yeah, that is fascinating. And also, as you were kind of talking about, mold, the component of mold and like what it does to your body, do you think that's also why Lyme disease wreaked such havoc in you versus maybe someone else who might have been bit by a tick?
Yep, exactly right. We hear about this all the time, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I took the antibiotics and I got much better. So if it worked for me, it should work for you.
Yep. That's what I was going to say too. Cause you hear that too. They're like, oh, well, I've had people that, have said, oh, well, yeah, but I garden and I pull 20 ticks off me every day and I'm fine. I have had Lyme 4 times, take the antibiotics, I'm good. And
Yeah.
there's this kind of just missing understanding in them that that's not how it always is. And
Mhm,
so, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, it's so much about the toxin bucket and
Mhm.
somewhat about the genes, although that's a little controversial. Dr. Richie Shoemaker
Yes.
taught all of us years ago that it's all about the genes. It's about that HLA gene type.
Yeah.
Well, in the groups I'm in, that's being debated now because many of us who have had the HLA do really, really well, and it doesn't always dictate how the person will do. I think that is probably a piece of the puzzle. But another piece that often gets missed is how loaded are you with radioactive elements? People get blown away when they see uranium and cesium on their urine panel,
Yes.
or Roundup or organophosphate pesticides or BPA. I can't tell you how many 45 and under we
Mm.
see in here loaded with BPA and phthalates, plastics.
Wow.
And so if that person has this unique soup of toxicity that is just creating a lot of inflammation, they are not going to respond to typical Lyme treatments like somebody else who, instead of maybe their drainage bucket, they had uh, 3 holes in their bucket and they were able to drain this stuff back out. Someone like myself or you, we may have only had 1 or 2 holes in our drainage bucket. And so our bucket of toxin is much fuller. And so we have a lot more chronic inflammation. And, Lyme loves inflammation.
Yep.
Lyme and parasites, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, all of them. I mean, they
Mhm.
thrive on inflammation. And so, yeah, you're not going to just come in there with a round of doxycycline or, Dapsone or anything else and knock it right out
Yep.
because you've got to deal with that toxic burden.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh my gosh. So once you did the ozone treatment, detoxed out the mold. Was that, I guess, the moment that your curiosity really started kicking in to moving more towards also looking at environmental
Yeah.
issues that are there? Like what sparked that path that you went down?
Yeah. Yeah, put it on my radar screen. And then my dad said, Teresa, you should do chelation. No,
Mhm.
Dad, I'm not doing that. But then, a few months later, I thought, oh, maybe Dad's right. So I went to another physician in town who did heavy metal chelation, and he tested me, and I was high in mercury and lead and aluminum.
Wow.
And the uranium wasn't picked up on at that time. I'm not really sure why.
Mhm.
I've had other physicians say to me, Teresa, you were probably so sick with the mold and the mercury and the lead that you just didn't have the ability to detox the uranium out. Because I did find the uranium in my body in 2020 later
Oof, oof.
when I was actually much better. But so that put it on my radar screen that, I think it's more than just mold. I think that it's toxic metals too.
Yeah.
And the more I was in training and study and research, the more I understood that pesticides and plastics were just as key
Yeah.
as mold and toxic metals.
Mhm.
And the more I tested people here in my office with the urine panels that we do, the more I just learned. You just learn
Yeah.
that, oh my stars, so many people are walking around with Roundup in their body.
Yeah.
And what that does to your gut health is unbelievable. So,
Yeah.
of course, Lyme is going to just take advantage of that big time. And Bartonella, and it can make it really tough to beat.
Yeah.
But I think that's how it put it on my radar screen, just little by little, learning on myself, learning from the testing, doing with other people. And so anyway, Yeah. Did I answer the question? Sorry. Sorry, my
Yes,
phone rang. I thought I had it on airplane mode.
that's okay. Yes, yes, that's what I was curious about. I was curious kind of like what started that interest into, like what we were talking about in the beginning, that you're so passionate now, and you're so, focused on also the environmental side of it. Why does the disease happen? Why can the disease thrive? And
Mhm.
really answering that question. And so that is so interesting. And it really is so common for Lyme patients. And the timeline is obviously very different for everybody to, they start treating the Lyme disease. Maybe they're getting worse, they're not getting better, it's not working, there's other issues. Then eventually, slowly but surely, mold comes into the picture, and they're like, wait a
Mhm.
second, I should check for mold. And then the heavy metals, and then parasites. And it's so interesting how everyone has kind of a similar story, where there's like this understanding that, wow, wait a second, there's so much more than just what we see here on the surface. And you start
Mhm.
unraveling everything piece by piece.
Yeah.
So for you, seems like it was the tick-borne illness, then finding the mold, then the heavy metals. Where did you go from there? How was your health after the, treating the heavy metals? Where did you kind of go from there?
In about May of 2016, after I did some IV chelation, which did help me a lot, but then I broke out in hives to the chelators, so
Oh
I
no.
couldn't keep going with it. But around that time, I also did learn about binders and how much binders can help. But around 2016, about, I would say 18 months into my treatment, I did, even though I felt like I had never made more than about 5% progress, I just almost overnight made 75% progress. I just like,
Wow.
I think my bucket drained enough. I got it low enough to where finally my immune system said, okay, it's all right. And my immune system pulled back. And I that year I probably had 4 flares, 4 relapses, and but they were not nearly as bad. And I was able to still work and able to get by with maybe just a very short nap. And instead of it going on for 12, 14 months, right, it went on for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The second year of my remission, I only had I would say 2 flares, and maybe they were only 4 weeks long. The third year of my remission, a flare might only last a week or two. By year 4, I had no flares at all.
Wow.
And I
Amazing.
think that IGeneX and others were not testing for the tick-borne relapsing fever Borrelia like they are now, like we are now.
Yes.
And I do believe I probably had one of those species that was coming and going, coming and going.
Mhm.
And, I had the classic sternal heaviness. That was probably one of my most troubling symptoms to me. So
Yeah.
constant heaviness in my chest, my
Yes.
heart pounding. It was awful.
Yeah.
And
Scary.
it was.
Yeah.
But I would say for the last, gosh, I've been in remission since 2016, so 8 years. But for about the past 5 years, I just don't have flares anymore. I
That's
don't have any.
amazing. That is
When
amazing.
I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I have good energy all day until I go to bed at night, which is
Wow.
like 9 o'clock.
But
you
still,
know?
that's a long day. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That is so incredible.
Hmm.
My gosh. So what would you say? This is probably a really hard question to answer, because I'm sure that there's a lot of things that you did, but what would you say really like stick out to you as the most critical things that you did in your journey to get better? Like what are like the I guess you could say the highlights, the big things, the things that you feel really pulled you out of it?
I think binders were really key for me
Mhm.
to get toxicity out of my body. I really, really needed
Yes.
lots and lots of those. I
Mhm.
think chelation, as for as long as my body tolerated it,
Mhm.
was very helpful. I
Yeah.
think I had to get the mold out of my house.
Yes.
That was key.
Can I ask you to just jump in a little bit more, Teresa? So
Yep.
specifically binders, there are so many binders out there. And I know we're going to get messages if I don't ask you this question. what binders did you try and which ones specifically work for you? Because we know we have different types of binders that work towards different types of toxins and different parts of the body. And then, from there, if you can explain what chelation is and things like that, and tell us how it helped you, because I think people are going to want more detail about these things that you're saying.
Sure. A binder is a natural substance that is a pill that you take that will go through your body and scour for various toxins and bind to it and then usher it out of your body. So back in the day, my physician had me, he wanted me to take 4 different ones, but there were so many timing issues, I could only do 2 of them. Activated charcoal was one that I took. Another was Takasumi powder, which is like a ground up bamboo charcoal. Another one I took was chlorella. And what was the 4th one? GI detox. So those are the ones I took back in the day. And I think they are effective. I used them. And when I was working in the clinic, I guided other people through using those binders. I personally now with my clients, use the Humics and Fulvics. So Humic and Fulvic, I like the Cellcore brand. I think they're very potent, very powerful, and I find that they do remove metals and they remove molds. And we do before and after testing, and we can see mercury, lead, arsenic. We can see those things come down. I've even tested people for those forever chemicals, PFAS. And I've seen people test for 7 or 8 of those. And then after they use the biotoxin or the carboxy come down. So I really like the Humics and Fulvic binders. Binders are something that just have to be taken every day for years. It's not something where you can take it for a couple weeks. And then chelation, to answer that question, that is FDA approved medication. DMSA for mercury and for lead and for a number of other metals. EDTA is the other FDA approved drug that's particularly beneficial for lead, for cadmium, and for a number of other toxic metals, thallium, and will on some level get cesium. So you would need to see a licensed physician for that. And they typically give those to you IV. That's how I got them. There's also pills that you can take. DMSA, DMPS is the IV form. DMSA is the pill form. And so I did some of that back in the day until my body just said no. I broke out in hives everywhere and I couldn't handle it anymore. But there's a number of people who do that and do get significant benefit. Not everybody can handle it. If someone's body is extremely inflamed by Lyme disease and Bartonella, parasites, and mold, they can't always handle chelation. So I myself like to use ion cleanse detox foot baths and saunas. So they're gentler. They're things you can buy yourself and do in the privacy of your home. And you can do a lot of them very consistently. And I have people buy those and do them at home. And they do also a good job with removing those metals and those chemicals, those plastics, and getting that out of your body so that, you're not so inflamed and Lyme isn't taking advantage of that inflammation. Did I answer the question, Matthew?
Yes, very much. And I'm taking ferocious notes, and I think I'm going to have to come back to the transcript and pull this out and write a blog post, because that's and I just know what our listeners are looking for based on the feedback of doing this for almost 5 years. You're brilliantly describing how you got better and how you sustained this remission state, right? Or I should say sustained health, and how you not have relapsed. But they're going to want to know, what have you done specifically? What binders, right? What kind of medication? And you just gave us all that detail. So yes, that 100% answered my question. Thank you.
Great.
Yes, yes. And that is so fascinating. And another question I'm sure that people will have, because some of these binders are definitely new, like they are ones that I haven't necessarily heard of. Are any of those something where you feel worse before you feel better? What is the experience like with the binders? Is it something which helps kind of gradually over time? Is it something that can kind of flare things up? What's your experience with those?
Well, I'm sure every practitioner has their own opinion on which binder they like the best. So I know
Mhm.
we're not supposed to name brands. I personally did not go forward using chlorella with my clients because I felt like there was more detox reactions with that one.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like it did require a lot more of it. The GI detox I did like, and my body, I mean, I like it for others, but my body personally did not necessarily do very well with that one. Everybody is so different. They really have to jump in there and try. The humics and fulvics that I like, it is rare that people have detox reactions. That's why I love them. They create what would be called a covalent bond. In other words, when they grab a hold of that, they are not letting go. Whereas some of the other things that people use, liposomal glutathione or chlorella, they might, or zeolites, they might grab a hold of it and move it. But if they don't get it all the way out, you can create that detox reaction. And, you've got that whole subset of people out there with mast cell activation syndrome. And I mean, that's a whole subject in and of itself.
Yeah.
And those poor souls really do struggle with binders.
Mhm.
Um, the vast majority of people do beautifully with them. Good old activated charcoal. A number of the people with mast cell activation syndrome can do activated charcoal, not all.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think it just depends on the person, Christina.
Yeah.
If you're going to have reactions, some people make very quick progress with the
Yeah.
binders, and other people, they have, like myself. I mean, I had to be on them for 6 months before I saw any real budging of my symptoms, but they budged.
Reese, I'm just going to jump in real quick because I want to comment on your comment about you don't want to recommend a particular brand. We don't care at Tick Bootcamp because we want people to get better, right? You bring a perspective of what works for you personally and your clients, and that's extremely valuable. And if it doesn't work for me, that's okay. So, people know, listen to this podcast, I take chlorella. You don't recommend it because it may be more, inflammatory. I took it later on in my healing journey and it helped. Maybe I took it earlier on, it wouldn't have been as helpful because it would have been more inflammatory, right? So
Mhm.
I think this information is really important so people can listen and make informed decisions based on where they're at in their journey and the details we're giving them. But it's never going to be a perfect science, and it's going to be trial and error to some degree. So feel free to mention, specific brands. Cellcore is big, so if it's a Cellcore binder, it's totally okay. I take Vital Plans Chlorella. Everybody knows that by Dr. Rolls. So there's a ton of stuff out there, and feel free to mention specific names, and it's totally okay because our listeners are going to
Okay.
want to know, what do you recommend, and we really would prefer you to share those details if you're comfortable. So I just wanted to
Okay.
put that footnote in.
All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Everyone does very much get curious. And, really just talking to you, honestly, it makes perfect sense, I guess, why you went into coaching and what you did, which I want to talk about. But really, it's the fact that when you're ill with something that is so multifaceted, like you were talking about, each patient is different. There's not a handbook to it. And so, a lot of the times when you're a patient, if you see a doctor and they give you a treatment and you take it and you get worse, you as the patient feel like, I'm being difficult. I feel like I'm being difficult because I now have to call them and say, hey, I actually feel worse. And so a lot of the times, until someone is so lucky to find someone like you who is like, no, it's okay, everyone's different, we're going to do trial and error, we're going to see what's going to work for you. I think that is just such a special thing and so validating, because I know that that's a story for so many people. I was the same way. There's stuff that worked for 90% of people, and so I take it and I get worse. And in the beginning, I was scared, I was timid to be like, you know what, I'm so sorry, but like, I feel worse, maybe it's just me, maybe it's in my head. And so just kind of talking about what is it that, obviously you have a passion for research and for understanding all of this. What kind of made the switch to where you said, okay, I'm going to set up shop, I'm going to start coaching, even if it has to be right here in the middle of my living room? What was that moment for you, and what was that drive in you that led you to start doing that?
Because I didn't want people to feel alone and hopeless like I did.
Yeah.
I think that was sort of my motto, bringing hope to the hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
That just galls my soul and my spirit to see someone that believes that I cannot get well.
Yeah.
My body, and they blame their body. My
Mm-hmm.
body just won't cooperate. My body rebels against me. My body just won't. And
Yeah.
yet it's really, that's not true. You just need better guidance
Yes.
around how to eliminate sources of inflammation.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. That is so, so, so true. I was that person in the beginning of my illness where I was mad at my body for failing
Yep.
me. And then once
Mm-hmm.
I started to understand that it was doing everything in its power to just keep me living, keep me breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and what it was kind of burdened with. So that's just so, so perfectly said. So yeah, I guess kind of jumping into, you decided to start coaching. Can you talk a little bit to us with, how you got started and then how that spread? I know you talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but just really kind of like how that started to grow and the different certifications that you went and got, and how everything bloomed from there as you began healing and could start to really give of yourself to others.
Yeah, like I said, I basically just was informally coaching people in the beginning, and that led to me taking my little ozone generator into people's homes. And that led to, I was too busy to do that anymore. You have to come to me in my living room, and you can use my ozone sauna that I bought, and I'll do an ion cleanse detox foot bath on you. So let's get this detox process started. And that, like I said, it just kept growing and growing to the point that I had to have an office. And so, yeah, opened this office in 2018, and we're up to 4 practitioners now and have a busy, thriving practice. So I'm not sure I answered the question
No, that's
correctly.
good. That's good. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. And I know that, just in the beginning, you were talking a little bit about all the different certifications you have, the
Oh,
conferences that
yes.
you go
Mm-hmm.
to. So, yeah, I wanted to just kind of chat about, I guess that like your passion for research and for kind of continuing,
Okay.
and then also kind of circle back to what we were talking about in the beginning about the environmental side of things, and what your approach generally is with patients.
Well, I think as a practitioner, you just want to learn everything that you can to get people better, because no two people are alike that walk through my door.
Yeah.
They're all so different. I hear something different in here every single day. Just
Yes.
when you think you've heard it all, you haven't heard it all.
Hmm.
And so you need those groups. I need ILADS. I need the ICI group. I need the Environmental Medicine Institute. And I'm constantly tapping into those other practitioners, doctors, nurse practitioners, researchers, pharmacists, and asking them questions. And then when they put out seminars and webinars, I'm that person that just attends them all, right?
Yeah.
Because when you show up in front of someone who is hopeless and who needs a relentless detective for their case, you just want to know all you can. And I guess I do. I have that insatiable thirst for growth, because this space is evolving so rapidly. You
Yes.
really have to do that. You
Yeah.
have to be constantly educating yourself. And I would say any of us who are out here treating Lyme and being successful at it have to do that. One of our favorite therapies in our office are liposomal essential oil blends. And I know you're going to want to hear
Yes.
about this.
Yes, this is exactly what I was leading into. I'm so curious about this, how you learned about it, how it works. I mean, this
Yeah.
is just fascinating.
Yeah. Um, when Johns Hopkins released their 7-year research project on what kills Lyme best, this was in 2018 or 2019, they found that essential oils of garlic, oregano, cinnamon, clove, frankincense, myrrh, lycia, um, a number of oils killed Lyme persisters better than the top 3 antibiotics. And I've even seen papers that it is better than Dapsone. And so when I heard that, actually, I was at the Baltimore Tick-Borne Integrative Conference in 2019. And I sat at the table with Dr. Yang Zhang, the
Wow.
leader of the Johns Hopkins research. And he's a humble man. He really, really wanted to help Lymies. Why else would you study essential oils, right?
Yeah.
There's no money to be made on that.
Yep.
And so I was at his table and there was a bunch of us holistic practitioners out here. And he's like, how are you using the oils and are you seeing success? And we had to admit we're using them, but people are herxing quite a bit, just putting them in capsules or rubbing it on their skin. And so, he presented the research at that conference. There's 1,000 physicians in the room and everyone's cheering, yay, But I sat there and I thought to myself, who's going to do anything about this?
Yeah.
You cannot make money
Yeah.
on something that you cannot patent. And so I just didn't think much of it. Went about my business using all of the other things that we use, the Byron White formulas, and the Booner herbs and Beyond Balance, the various herbal companies. And I show up at clinic there in Kingston, New York. Oh gosh, that would have been later in 2019, I think. And Hilary Thing, my mentor, and then her mentor, Greg Lee, in Baltimore, had been
Greg Lee's
spinning.
the best. Sorry to interrupt. We've had him on. He's like a mad scientist, and I absolutely
Yeah.
love Greg Lee. Sorry. Had to
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, he and my mentor Hilary Thing are colleagues. And so together they started spinning those oils into liposomes. And so we show up in clinic one day and Hill says to us, "Hey, when you go in to see the patients in the rooms, I want you to take note of the new thing that I've put them on." And we go into room after room and these people are saying, because, as a holistic practitioner, you're trained that people are going to herx a lot on the Byron Whites and the Booner herbs, but they're going to get better. So cheerlead them on, help them to stick with it, which we all did. But now we're going into rooms and people are saying, yeah, that tonic that she put me on, suddenly this is getting better and that's getting better and that's getting better. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty interesting. And room after room, I'm hearing this, but I thought, I'm going to stay skeptical. You got to stay skeptical. Came back to the next clinic that we did, hearing the same thing. Well, by the third time I came back to clinic and we're hearing these same things, I'm like, I think this is a cutting edge breakthrough.
Yeah.
I think this is really, when it comes to herbal medicine, nothing really touches a liposomal essential oil because the liposomes deliver those tiny fractions of drops of essential oils very safely and deeply into the body, protects the body from the oils, protects the oils from the body. And so we weren't really seeing a tremendous amount of die-off with them. There's some. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some, especially in the people that were living in mold and were very People with the mast cell activation syndrome still were having some, but many of them just weren't having nearly the die-off that we were used to seeing with some of the other formulas that we'd all been trained on. So 5 years ago, I started making them here in Cincinnati and using them with my clients. And they're everybody's favorite. They taste awful. They taste just awful. But people find ways to get around it. And even children and teens will take it. Because when you see a much quicker result than what you're used to seeing, you're willing. And over the years, I'm not allowed to make claims, so I have to be careful what I say. But people tell me that their strep that wasn't touched by 5 rounds of antibiotics got taken out by those liposomal oils. People with MRSA have told me that same thing. People with C. diff, people with ulcerative colitis. And I mean, they have just been a game changer. And I call them God's medicine because Stephen Herod Booner taught us nature fights nature best.
Yes.
And, you take an antibiotic that is one isolated compound. Maybe it's derived from a plant, but it's one compound. And that bug is going to be able to change its genetics to resist that after a while. And so you're going to get a lot more resistance with the antibiotics. An essential oil, just one oil alone is going to have 15 to 20 or 30 different compounds. And then you blend, because I custom write formulas. So we'll blend 5 or 10 oils in one bottle, and you might have several dozen compounds. No bug is going to resist that. They don't resist. And somehow they're intelligent enough that we don't see them killing off the good bacteria either, like the antibiotics do.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have research to support that. So I have to watch out for my claims. I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Of
I
course.
don't want
Yes.
the FDA coming after me for making false claims. So I will only say that this is what is reported to me.
Yes. Yes.
And that it is a fact that we are not seeing resistance forming, and that the hundreds of practitioners now who have been trained between Greg Lee and Hilary Thing up and down the East Coast, and a few of us here in the Midwest, and there's some out in California, we're just not seeing people develop these gut-based dysbiosis situations after using them. If anything, they get much better. I think plants are intelligent. Plants have an inherent intelligence about them. Antibiotics do not. They're synthetic. They're made in a factory somewhere. And the plants grown by nature, they just have an inherent intelligence to where they kind of know what to kill and they know what to leave alone. So we do not see that people. Now, we do know that oregano oil taken in capsules can create problems, killing off good bacteria. And I've seen people in here who've developed C. diff because of that, but wrapped in a liposome, we just don't. And then you're getting tiny fractions of drops.
Yes.
So it's such a small amount, but the liposome itself delivers it so potently that I'm very thrilled and excited about the gift that God, the universe, has given us with these. And thanks to the hard work of Johns Hopkins and Dr. Ying Zhang and Greg Lee. And Hilary Thing. So I want to give them credit, give credit where credit's due. But I think that they are a game changer for many people. And I'm really excited about them, and thank you for letting me talk about them.
No, this is so cool. I mean, I'm so fascinated, and I'm curious if, because I know that with Lyme disease, a lot of the times you end up having SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, also coming with it. Like patients have that and they have um, candida and yeast. Do you find from the feedback you get from your patients that when they take these oils, that maybe it also helps some of these other things as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you send garlic, cinnamon, oregano, clove in a liposome down
Yes.
to the gut.
Yeah.
Um, SIBO, I've seen SIBO clear pretty quickly,
It's
actually.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, that's just,
Again,
yeah.
I'm not allowed to make the claim. I have to be
But
careful.
you've seen it in patients, which is
Yes,
that's,
yes.
the
I've
fact that
flown
they're
under the
reporting
radar
that.
for years, but I'm finally ready to share it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, this is just amazing. Because in my head, I'm thinking of like all the uses. And I think, so much of what happens to a lot of patients, myself included, is that when you first find out you have Lyme disease, you're given the antibiotics. And
Yep.
typically by then you are so weak. And those antibiotics just kills you, it just makes your gut even more just like weak and not protected, and the leaky gut gets worse, and then suddenly you're down to eating like 2 or 3 foods because you're allergic to everything, and it's a mess. You create such a problem, you're herxing on top of it. And so
Mhm, mhm,
hearing that there's something that is an option that is, it's seemingly gentler and
mhm,
very effective, and also kind of has a side effect, quote unquote, of helping these other co-issues, is such a gift. And that's so cool.
mhm,
I've
mhm.
never heard of it. Whenever I was reading about your work on it and that you use it, I said, I know we have to save this to the end, but I was just like, I just want to jump into it so badly because just never heard of it. And
Yeah.
that is just so, so, so incredible. So I guess my question is, if there are patients that are interested in learning more about it, on your website, do you have information, resources? Is it still something that's a little bit kind of more underground? How can patients get more info on liposomal essential oils and treatments with it, finding doctors that do it, etc.?
You kind of need someone who's been trained by Hilary Thing from the Uprooting Lyme Clinic in Kingston, New York, or Greg Lee. I think that they've trained a lot of practitioners. I'm just one of the trainees, right?
Yeah.
They're the masters. So Hilary has done some great write-ups on it. I haven't seen, Greg actually has done some great write-ups on it. He helped pioneer it. So I think that people are not going to find much at all out on Google.
Yeah. I can I can definitely believe that. I can definitely believe that. So I guess, now looking back with all the information, right? If there's a patient and they say, someone that says, "Hey, I was bit by a tick.
Yep.
I'm not feeling very good." What what are the steps that you would give them? What are the tools that you would give them if you would have
Yep.
to give them a roadmap?
Yep. When someone has an acute tick bite, when they come to us, we will immediately start them on what I call my tick bite formula. It's a very potent essential oil formula with garlic.
Mhm.
And we will also use cryptolepis. Cryptolepis in all of the medical journals tests as number one as far as a tincture, something that cannot be put into essential oil. And so it's just a great companion, and nothing really escapes that combination. So I will recommend that they do that for if they're symptomatic for 2.5 months, if they're asymptomatic for 6 weeks.
Very cool. Very
And
cool.
I'll individualize and customize that to people depending on other comorbidities that they might have.
Mhm.
Hilary has a website called Bloom Reveal, where she sells many of the tick or the Lyme formulas from her website.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's so
Mm-hmm.
good to know.
Yep.
So I have one question, Theresa. I just want to now sell you a little bit because you're selling everybody else, but I think a lot of people are going to want to talk to you and work with you through your practice. So if people want to learn more about you and how to work with you, where can they go? Social media, Facebook, phone, etc.
Yeah. Right now, you would go to foundationswellnesscoaching.com, but we're in the process, like in this month, rebranding. So, I believe we're changing to foundationswellnesscare.com.
Well,
But
what
if
the good
you,
news is, Theresa, you can let us know. I will put the link in the show
yeah.
notes. So anybody listening, just click on the little down arrow underneath this podcast. You'll see the show notes. There'll be a hyperlink. You go to the website. So you can send us that, Theresa, and we'll be sure to put the proper link in the show notes for you.
And we have a Facebook and Instagram account too. So you can find us in any of those places.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you, Theresa, for coming on and dropping so much knowledge. And Christina, I didn't even have to be here. You made my job easy. I was just taking notes the entire time. So, Christina, you are an amazing co-host. Thank you so much for coming back and helping guide this beautiful story.
Thank you. This has been such a joy. I mean, I think we could sit here and talk for 3 more hours and just pick Theresa's brain. I mean, this has been so fun. I've learned so much, and I'm going to need a copy of those notes of yours, Matt.
Oh, yeah. Trust me. There's going to be a transcript.
Yes.
There's going to be notes, summaries, all kinds of stuff coming out of this. So that'll be shared as well.
Perfect.
So again, thank you, Theresa. Thank you, Christina. And Theresa, we'll have to do some sort of follow-up or some sort of something down the road because there's far more content I know we didn't get into. So more to come.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate your work and how you help us Lymies out here.